So Pareto, we would be discussing Pareto, the game changer in problem solving and everyday life. So I am, let me introduce myself. Okay, before I introduce myself, let's introduce ourselves. So welcome to the KZ tribe. We seek ways to enhance productivity. We are thirsty to boost performance. We love to continuously grow and improve. We are KZ. Yeah, that's the fuel. Boom. Yeah, now let's rise. Okay, so I'm Ibrahim Kazin, that's my name. I do IT consulting, do some small psychology. I'm interested about leadership, soft skills, blah, blah, blah. And I also teach project management, and I teach it fairly well. And I have a 100% pass rate, so that's a good one. Okay, story. We've been training for several years, training people from different organizations, from different countries all over the world. Yeah, that's by the side. Let's jump right in. What are we doing today? We want to discuss Pareto principle. So, Pareto Ishikawa, a very deadly combo on problem solving. You realize that yourself shortly. And then we want to discuss some common thoughts about Pareto, because the concept of Pareto itself is quite popular. You hear Pareto all around 80-20, 80-20. You hear Pareto around 80-20. So many books, so many this. So let's bring the concept closer to us. Okay, so then we'll also discuss the limitations of Pareto. I hope we'll have time to get there. So the first question here is, do we feel guilty? Do you feel guilty when you take shortcuts? Yes. Do you feel guilty when as in the shortcut I'm about is not the illegal shortcut. I mean, when you try to cut corners the right way, when you try to look for efficient ways of doing things, when you try to use systems to be able to make your journey faster, to make your work easier, to make your work merrier, do you feel guilty? Yeah, it's a funny question, but some people actually do feel guilty when they do things like this. So please, if you feel guilty, either change your mindset or sorry, you cannot work together, So if you want to be part of the Keynesian tribe, you should be ready for continuous improvement. You should always ask yourself every day, how do I improve this thing I'm working on? So how do I get the shortcut, the legal shortcut? Yeah, that's the word. So story time. Let's tell some stories first. In 1906, someone, an Italian philosopher, economics, and a gardener, his name is Vilfredo Pareto. He discovered that roughly 20% of his pea plant, I told you he's a gardener, 20% of his pea plants seem to get about 80% of his peas. Okay? And then remember, he's also an economist. So he also noticed that about 80% of the land in Italy, I said he's an Italian, is owned by just 20% of the people in the country. 1906, remember. Okay, so he extended this research and found out that there's actually much more in terms of this kind of pattern in relation to wealth prosperity. He extended his research and found out that there's a lot of huge disproportionate wealth distribution around all of Europe and not just Italy. Okay, so that's how it started. And then someone came, Joseph Juran, is widely regarded as the father of quality management. Those who know some level of Six Sigma project management, you know that Juran is a very familiar name. So he's a Romanian American business theorist. He stumbled upon Pareto's research that was done 40 years earlier. And then he named it 80-20 rule, Pareto's principle of unequal distribution. Remember, Pareto, when he did this one, he used it to conceptualize wealth and prosperity. And then Juran extended that to say, okay, this thing also applies in business situations. This thing also applies when managing systems, particularly in the direction of managing quality on whatever you're working on. So he observed that in quality control departments, most production defects resulted from a small percentage of the causes of the defects. So this phenomenon is called the vital few and the trivial many. The vital few and the trivial many. Vital few, trivial many. That is, the defects. 20% of the defects are from 80% of the causes. That is, causes, what could bring about defects. Sorry. 80% of the problems, 80% of the defects are from 20% of the causes. Sorry, I flipped it. 80% of the defects are from 20% of the causes. We'll talk more about this. Okay, now, then when Duran said this, then suddenly patterns started popping up around. Patterns started popping up. 80% of innovation comes from 20% of staff. 80% of decisions made in a meeting usually come from 20% of the meeting time. 80% of your success in life usually comes from 20% of your efforts. 80% of complaints are usually from 20% of your services. 80% of project benefits are usually from 20% of the work. 80% of problems can be traced to 20% of causes. 80% of revenues usually are traced to 20% of products. Please note that these things are mere approximations. They are not necessarily on stone. It's just the idea is vital few, trivial many. That's the idea. It's not as if it's always cast on stone 80-20, 80-20. It could be 95-5, it could be 70-30, it could be 60-40. But there's always an element of the rule of a vital few being controlled or causing the trivial many. So that's that. We have more. We have more. The one that jumps in my eye here is 20% of your wardrobe is worn 80% of the time. Is that not true? That's true. Well, for most people, that's true. So you find this kind of relationship popping out in many, many areas of our life. But the question now is, why should I care? What's all these big grammar that Kaizen is even disturbing me? As in, why should I care? Why do we even think this makes sense? Okay, so let's find out. This is why you should care. And you should pay a lot of attention here, because understanding this principle can significantly multiply your efforts, can significantly blow up your capacity, can significantly modify your thinking on how you approach issues, on how you approach problems, on how you solve issues. So here is why you should care. Pareto is talking, listen. When presented with multiple courses of action in solving a problem, we almost never would have the time and resources to realistically pursue every single option. We would almost never ever have that kind of time, never have the kind of resources to be able to pursue every single option. A similar concept is in risk management, which when you identify your risk, risk management is essentially identification, planning, identification, analysis, then risk planning, then you implement your risk response. But you would never be able to implement, never have the resources. So you want to do some form of selection. So that's an analogy you want to bring into Pareto here. You would not have the time and resources to pursue every single possible source of the problem. So you have to do some form of ranking. So the 80-20 principle refers to the that the vital 20% that has 80% of the impact. How can I identify the vital 20% of how can I identify the core, the 20% that once I'm able to solve 20% of these issues, of the causes of the problem, I would have been able to take care of 80% of my problem. What are those 20% that if I'm able to identify and solve those 20%, it will give me 80% impact in relation to the issues I have on ground. And so that's the idea. In other words, prioritizing solutions which address the top 20% of causes, but contributes or mitigates 80% of the damage. Okay, let's proceed. I hope it's not getting complicated. So There's this quote from Animal Farm. There's this popular quote from Animal Farm that all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. All possibilities equal. Issues that if you solve that one single thing, you can take out 30% of your problem. There are some that if you solve that one single thing, you can take out 12% of your problem. There are some that if you solve that one single thing, it will take out 1% of your problem. There are some that if you solve that one single thing, it takes out 0.001% of your problem. How do you prioritize? What do you do? So when you are solving, are you going to work randomly or you want to take out some time? Identify the items that have the largest impact. Identify the items that have the largest significance. And then concentrate on those ones first. And then by the time you have done 1, 2, or 3 of those ones, you see that you'll be able to achieve a chunk of the impact. In fact, in some cases, you might even overlook the remaining 20%. You might, depending on the circumstance. Don't forget, you would not always be able to attend to all issues. So that takes us back to our anthem. Kaizen Tribe, we seek ways to enhance productivity. We are thirsty to boost performance. We love to continuously grow and improve. We are Kaizen. So the whole idea in being able to adopt the Kaizen approach to life is you're always looking at circumstances and saying, where is that tiny step I can take that can give me huge impact in terms of results? Where is that tiny step I can take that can give me huge impact in terms of productivity? How can I take one step and get the value of taking 50 steps? Pareto principle is one of those secret tools you can use that can stand you out in terms of getting results. Yeah. So back to my interesting slide, PM competency is a potential superpower. Essentially, what it means is that the world of project management has tons and tons and tons of tools, techniques, methodologies, quacks, as in not quack per se, as in tweaks, things you can tweak, some tools, some under the leaf approaches that you could use to enhance your capacity, that you could use like a bag of tools, like a toolbox, as an engineer, but as a business person, in fact, as a human in life, there are tons and tons of tools that you need to be able to grow. So PM, project management competency, actually is like a huge dictionary or a huge basket of several tools that you can pick and pick and pick and use at different times of your business life, personal life, career, and all of that. So last week we picked Ishikawa. Today we are talking about Pareto. Okay, now, so quickly, let's use the next 1 minute. Everybody, 1 minute. Just think of an interesting dimension of Pareto in your personal and business life. Just 1 minute. 1 minute. Just give me one interesting dimension of Pareto in your personal life, business life, career, blah, blah, blah. So 1 minute, your time starts now. Okay, so, Abby, yes now. 1 minute now. Okay, so let's go back to problem solving. All what we've been doing before now are just like the preamble for us to have a broad base about the concept of Pareto principle. So let's go back to problem solving. So we had a discussion around the concept of divergent thinking and convergent thinking. We said divergent thinking is that approach to problem solving wherein you want to take out some good amount of time to think through lots and lots of possible ramifications, causes of the problem, and not diverge. You are diverging. You want to come up with as many possible ideas, as many possible sources of the issue, as many possible, so it's diverging out. But convergent thinking now is you are trying to focus on something. You are trying to tailor your facts and figures in a particular direction. That's convergent thinking. Okay? And we had this discussion last week of saying divergent thinking, convergent thinking, which is better. Of course, the discussion we had anyway, let's repeat what we had last week. Convergent thinking and divergent thinking can be used together in a three-step process: brainstorming, reducing and categorizing, ranking and selecting. What we discussed last has taken care of point number one, some aspect of point number two. So today we'll be going to point number three. Don't forget that one of those things we want to discuss today is the deadly combo of Pareto and Ishikawa on how you actually approach problem solving. We discussed Ishikawa last. This is an example of an Ishikawa diagram in which you have a problem, you have something you want to solve, and then you identify the major categories of the possible root causes of the problem. And for each one, you do a secondary brainstorming on, okay, for this category of root cause, what are the possible root causes under it? And for each of the sub root causes, if it's possible for you to even brainstorm on sub root causes. So Ishikawa is a visual brainstorming tool, as you can see here, that is used to give a structure to how you are brainstorming, not just that you are just brainstorming into the cloud. You're actually brainstorming and you are arranging or visualizing your steps, your plans, your structure in an interesting way. So Ishikawa leads us into divergent thinking. We discussed so much last week about how divergent thinking helps you at the initial stage of problem solving to be able to look through tons and tons of possible sources. The problem of jumping straight into convergent thinking is a possibility of you missing things out. We've discussed all of those already. Now, we are here. We're able to use Ishikawa to think, brainstorm, and come up with possible root causes for our problem. The problem could be anything. We discussed this last week. Okay, now, Pareto. Where does Pareto come in here? Pareto comes in for this point, ranking and selecting. Don't forget I mentioned earlier, I said it is practically impossible for every one of us, for any one of us, to be able to take out time and resources to investigate every possible cause, every possible or every potential source of the problem. You would not have the time, you would not have the resources to be able to do all of these things. And that's one of the reasons why you use Pareto. Another name for Pareto is the law of the vital few. It's also called the principle of factor sparsity. And then the popular name is the 80-20 principle. So when you say law of vital few, it means how do you identify the few of all out of the 100% of possible sources? Which ones are part of the few that account for the huge chunk of impact? I gave you an example earlier. I said you have different possible sources or different possible issues. One of them has an impact of 40% on the problem. Another one has an impact of 20%. Another one has an impact of 3%. And that has an impact of 0.01%. So how do you identify those ones that have the biggest impact? A lot of times, just focusing on those ones gives you a huge ton of impact in whatever you're working on. So let's use Pareto to now bring down this, okay? So how do we use Pareto and Ishikawa, as I've explained earlier? The first thing you do is you take your time to identify the problems, which we have done with Ishikawa. We have used Ishikawa as the visual brainstorming tool to help us in structuring the possible root causes of the problem. Now, you score each of the options. What do we mean when we say scoring each of the options? It's explained here on this slide, okay? For each of all these options you have here, crime, feeling cheap, depressing, run down areas, spacious offices, reasonably pleasant building, sales, depressed area, results, mainly good, frustrations, comparison with which areas do they know where they are happy. All of these things you have here, all the identified possible causes. You now collect data because you want to understand, you want to analyze to find out which ones have the biggest impact. And then we are doing this thing, well, you could do it qualitatively or quantitatively. What do we mean? You could either do like a top of the edge, big impact, medium impact, low impact kind of thing. But a better way is, okay, look at this example here. Look at this example here. Mr. ABC Fashion School or something. They're having an issue with defects in their shirts. And they want to investigate, why do we have defects in our shirts? Or why do people complain about our products? Okay, so they do their Ishikawa, they're able to identify lots and lots of possible reasons why they have issues with their shirts. Environmental issues, issues with manpower, issues with the equipment, issues with this, issues with that, issues with the clothes itself, issues with the way you're packaging, blah, 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 like that. Okay, so now, what next? Now, for each of the issues, can you look into the past? Can you look into the past and say, okay, the issues we have identified, can we do like a count? Can we do a count of the issues? Okay, in the past 1 year, how many cases of button defects have we had? In the past 1 year, how many cases of pocket defects have we had? In the past 1 year, how many cases of collar defects, cuff defects, sleeve defects, and all the other potential defects that you could have? And then do a count. Do a count. Based on the count, there are 1,000,001 possible things that have been going wrong, but they don't have the time to be able to attend to all the possible issues. They want to know how to prioritize. They want to know which ones to take their attention. So they do a count. And then based on their count, they're able to realize that button defects and pocket defects takes about 65% of all issues that they are having. So what this means is if they're able to pay attention to button defects and pocket defects, they would have been able to achieve a huge impact, 65% impact in terms of all the issues they have. So this is an example of using counts of occurrences. Another way of scoring each option is related to stakeholders, maybe interviews, focus group. The whole idea is for each of your items, you want some form of metric to be able to have an idea of the impact of that cost, or of the impact of that cost. So you want to relate to stakeholders, maybe a questionnaire, an interview sessions, focus group, whatever form of data collection you want to use. The whole idea is you want to have an idea of the impact of each of them. Another form is historical information. Sometimes the data you would use to make your decision might not necessarily always originate from you. You could also look at occurrences of maybe competitors, issues from maybe historical data of maybe secondary sources. The whole idea is you don't want to just use your guts. Well, of course, your gut will play a role, but largely you want to use some form of data to be able to rank. That's the idea. You want to rank. You want to rank your possible in order of impact. And then once you have these things ranked, boom, you have a clear idea of the ones that have the biggest impact in terms of, yes, being able to solve the issues. Okay, so this is an example that you have here. This is another one. This is more like you have an organization, maybe manufacturing or something. They're having issues with maybe some part of their production. And then they took account of, okay, what kind of problems have we been having before now? If we want to make some good progress as an organization, let's take account of the failures you have been having. And then they realize that about 80% or 80-something% of their failures are as a result of technical failures, workforce problems. And then look at environmental factors. Shortage of resources, very small. Your business, a lot of harm. If you want to solve this problem, you want to solve the problem of the organization, and you are focusing on environmental factors, and then you are focusing on, well, I don't know what they mean by shortage of resources, but whatever they mean by shortage of resources, what is from this graph, it tells us that it's not the core factor here. The core factor is technical failures. Go and invest in your equipment. Technical failures, go and invest in training. Workforce problems, how do you bring the best hands on board? Working on those two would give you the big jump in terms of value. In fact, spend all your money, spend all your time and resources fixing the top two problems, fixing the top two possible sources of the problem. And then you'll be able to get about 80% of the potential impact in the organization. Aha! So, those who have got my trainings, they will know that there's this example I use a lot in my trainings. I say, married people, Pareto can all be applied in your relationship. That takes me to a very, very important point. And that's the point that in the real world, when you are applying the Pareto principle, you have to use a lot of high-level discretion in knowing what to plot against, in knowing what to look out for. And there are lots of cases in which you are looking out for more than one thing. So this issue of relationship is a typical example of wherein you are looking out for more than one thing. As you are trying to use Pareto in relation to the count of issues you are having. That's one angle to it. Another angle is using Pareto in direction of the impact. And I hope we understand that both approaches might not necessarily give you the same results. I don't know, is that unanimous? We agree on that. So it tells you that in implementing, give it some good thoughts. Wait, how do I categorize my issues? And then when you are also using the Pareto principle, Pareto analysis, using the Pareto charts, you also want to give it some good amount, good thoughts on what am I bringing out? What am I plotting? What am I considering? Because a lot of times, there are usually more than one possible things you could consider. It's just like in the case of probability of occurrence and impact. When you're managing risk, if you look at probability of occurrence alone, you'll be misguided. If you look at impact alone, you'll be misguided. You have to combine both probability of occurrence and risk. Sorry if I've confused you, but I think you should be able to take out some sense from that. Okay, so here is our second to the last slide. So although Pareto was initially used, I mean, when you say Pareto, in relation to projects, is usually looked at from the direction of managing quality, because when you have issues, when you want to investigate your issues, you should always have it at the back of your mind that you will not be able to solve all issues. You want to get the top 20 that will give you 80% impact or significance in terms of solving issues. So usually talked about in direction of quality management, controlling quality on the project. So, but the application of Pareto goes beyond. There is almost any direction you can think of. You would always find some elements of Pareto. And please note, when we say Pareto, it's not always cast on stone to be 80-20. It's not always cast on stone. The idea is vital few and trivial many. Vital few, trivial many. Can you get the vital few that would give you the significance of all the trivial many combined? As I was discussing this with my team, somebody was saying, even in Nigeria, in terms of the lopsidedness of don't let me be political, but don't let me say anything. But the idea is you can always see some element of Pareto almost in every direction you look. So this powerful tool does not tell you what to do. Please note, it's a continuum. we are still using the Ishikawa, using the Pareto, is still about understanding the problem. Ishikawa gave us a broad view of the problem and the sources of the problems. Ishikawa, divergent, Pareto is trying to convergent thinking. So that does not necessarily say is cast on stone, you always get the problem right. That does not always necessarily say that you have the solution, but at least when you are in the direction of the solution, you are far more likely to get the solution than someone who is in the direction of 5,000 solutions. You know? So the powerful tool does not tell you what to do in terms of the solution itself. It only guides you in the direction of the solution. But it provides information to you such that you can make the best decisions regarding the problem at hand. Pareto analysis is not only for problem solving, it is also a huge tool in decision making. So at this point, we have come to the end. And like I said earlier, Pareto, Ishikawa, these are just two of you could leverage on in the big basket of project management. Whatever you do, whether you come for project management training or not, be inquisitive, go around and see how you can leverage on tools. Please don't be hardworking. I want to, relax. There are some tools and techniques you can leverage on that will take your life easier. In fact, some of these things we are discussing, you could leverage on them, walk into a company beside you and say you're a consultant, you're going to solve their problems. Some of these things are like copy and paste approach to solving problems. Copy and paste approach to leveraging on shoulder of giants to be able to achieve a lot more in life. You don't really have to start and want to fix all problems on your own, using your own thinking alone. You can leverage systems. There are tons and tons of systems, existing systems of lots of professionals all around the world. So be inquisitive. Go about, read, have mentors, listen to people, read articles, blog posts, technical write-ups, and stuff like that, to be able to shape your thinking, to be able to leverage on systems that others have been able to design for you, for us all. So thank you very much.